welcome into another edition of the Throwing at Chairs podcast. This is a little bit of a special podcast. It is the 10th episode of TCP for this season of Indiana men's basketball. So without further ado, I'm your host, Hayden Smith, joined alongside the Hoosier Network's finest, Audrey Marr and Thomas Montalbano. Guys, before we get into the train wreck that is Indiana men's basketball at this current time in the season, we're going to get this episode started like we do with every episode of the Throwing Chairs podcast with our icebreaker of the day. This one doesn't really require as much thinking as the other ones have in the past.
Oh, God.
So, what is a bucket list place that you want to visit before you die?
Ooh. I think I want... I went when I was very, very young, so I don't really remember, but I think I want to go back to Greece. I think that'd be very fun.
You went to Greece?
I did go to Greece.
Wow.
Yeah, it was so fun. I think I want to go back. I'd say that's a bucket list item.
That sounds like it would be awesome. Thomas,
so
what
fun.
about you?
I think that's a great question, and I disagree that it doesn't require a lot of thinking.
Okay.
There's a couple places, but my mind,
You can
honestly...
name them. I mean, we've got players to watch, so
Yeah,
if you
players.
want
All right.
multiple
Are we just
places.
going to go back to that every episode? I'm
Every
sorry.
episode.
One of, I think this is a unique answer. There's this place in Portugal called Nazaré, and they have the biggest waves in the world
Okay.
for surfing,
Cool.
which I would never, ever do. But it's like literally like 100-foot waves, and that would be... It's insane to see it on video, and to see it with my own eyes would be really something, but... I don't know. I would love to go there, but bucket list, like, I don't know. There's so many places.
Yeah.
Tropical places. I went to Europe 2 years ago for the first time. It was the first time I left the country, and that was amazing. So
Where'd
I'd
you
say
go in Europe?
I went to Barcelona.
Okay.
Oh, that's a trip.
Yeah, it was awesome. And then we also went to Italy just for a few days and saw Venice, which was awesome. I wanted to make sure to see Venice because apparently it's drowning.
It's like sinking,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So,
You only got a certain amount of time.
Yeah, you only got a couple days.
Literally. But how about yourself, Hayden?
So I've been to Europe before. I was in the UK. I was in France, Paris, Belgium, Germany. So I'd say the one place I really want to visit is Japan. I'd love to go to Tokyo and then just see the mountains of Japan. And I mean, I've heard how beautiful the landscape is there. And that's really what I'm all about. Whenever I went to Belgium, I'm pretty sure it was, they had beautiful mountains, and that's what I'm all about. So
Yeah, I want to see, like, I don't know, as many different cultures as I can.
Yeah, definitely.
So, good answers.
plenty of places to go, and this is a good way to get started. But now let's get into the thick of it with the Indiana game against Wisconsin that took place last Friday, I believe. First of all, how was the trip with you guys? It sounded like it was pretty snowy up there.
Thomas had a few words about it, but
I'll get to that. I'll go first.
I thought it was great. I got to go to my hometown and had some time at home. I thought it was a very fun trip. But Madison needs to get better about their roads. Oh my goodness.
That's crazy.
It was like an inch of ice on the roads. It was
Especially
crazy.
for how much snow you guys have to get every year. That blows my mind.
Exactly.
That they're
I don't
not
know
more
if
prepared.
I don't know if it's because their students weren't back on campus just yet.
Fair.
But still, I don't even think that's much of a valid excuse. I mean, people still are there. There was a lot of people at the game and everything, but Thomas, you might want to. How was your trip?
I want to say before I get into it, like, I had a great time. I had a great
Before
time.
we get into it,
I picked up my dad on the way. We visited my brother as well, and
That's
I had a really, really fun time. I forgot about the road, so I'm glad you brought that up. You couldn't see the lines. I was driving on the opposite side of the road for 2 years. One, you couldn't see the lines, but two, I was used to Bloomington where everything's a one-way, and it wasn't until a car was coming my way and my brother started screaming to go on the other side. Yeah, so, but yeah, I mean, it was freezing. I tweeted that it was a different level of cold, and I stood by that every single day. It was so cold. I mean, I was complaining enough this week, and I don't want to keep doing that, but it was... Yeah, the cold is not for me. But I had a really, really fun time. I stayed there. I got up there Thursday and left Sunday. So I had a great weekend there.
Good.
It was unfortunate the game couldn't have gone a little bit better. But other than that, it was a really fun trip.
Yeah, well, I watched it from the comfort of my own home, and I had the luxury of turning off the TV whenever it really got hairy. So Yeah, that's where we really get to start with things. The Hoosiers lose to the Badgers 91-79. They still have not won in the Kohl Center since 1998. Guys, initial takeaways from this ball game. I mean, really, it was really just disgusting to watch, really, for that whole first half, really for the whole first 3 quarters of the game up until that last couple minutes there in the end of the second half. What were your all's takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, it was not one of Indiana's better performances. I think it really just was the epitome of how they've been playing on the road. And granted, they did have that shocker of Kel'el Ware not playing. And it probably would have been a much closer game if they did have Kel'el. But that's still, you still had a little bit of time to prepare for that. And then obviously there were those moments in the game that when CJ Gunn got ejected, it was just those points in the game where you saw how Indiana was feeling in their play. And they were just defeated. They looked deflated. And it just was a deflating game.
Yeah. Losing Ware definitely, changed the entirety of the game. I'm sure it would have been closer and overall much different. You can't lose your 7-foot big man and expect things to go exactly as they're supposed to go. But I don't know. Beyond that, I was listening to the Assembly Call podcast on the way home from Wisconsin.
Shout out
Assembly Call, and I don't want to steal everything they said, but I thought they had some really good points, and one of them being that I agree with this point, that it almost seems like Woodson wants to prove that his offensive scheme, that his plan works, rather than what's important, getting the win. And I don't know. I like Woodson. I trust that he's the right guy to steer this ship, but I things have to change and things continue to not, and it's just you didn't think it could get any more shocking. It just continues to get more shocking that things aren't changing, and the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, and we're not getting a different result, and it's kind of insane. Yeah. I do have to say Max Klesman had one of the best performances of the year. He scored 20 straight for Wisconsin, which is pretty unheard of, but it was not the Hoosiers game, to say the least.
Yeah, I will say, to your point, Thomas, I think, again, Indiana fans are some of the best fans in all of college basketball. There's no question about that. But there is a certain point where they might be feeding the fire at this point, especially social media. I mean, everybody knows how bad social media can be on some of these players' mental health. I mean, you look at Xavier Johnson, he's just hasn't been able to bounce back. I mean, even CJ Gunn, I noticed he posted something on his Instagram earlier today about how he's really just like not listening to social media because and I like that. They don't need to listen to social media because they're just fans. They're not the head coaches. They haven't been in the game for X amount of years. They don't really know all what they're talking about, but they are informed. I'll say outside of Malik Renew and Mackenzie Mbako, really just nobody was able to get going. I know Trey Galloway had a couple moments where he looked like he was kind of slowing the offense down and getting everybody wrapped up and ready to go. But I mean, beyond Mbako and Malik Renew, it just looked really rough out there for Indiana, and nobody really knew what they were going to do. And at this point in the season, Indiana has now lost 2 straight, the first one to Purdue and the second one to Wisconsin, and they have another quad 1 game coming up against Illinois. What's really brought us to this point, and what I'm really trying to say here is, at this point in the season, really, where does Indiana go from here?
Well, to answer the first part of that, obviously the main thing is it's a totally different team, 10 new faces, and they lost not only Trace Jackson-Davis and Jalen Hood-Schifino, but Race Thompson, Miller Kopp. Those are 2 guys that would be essential on this team, on this year's team.
People forget how good Race Thompson really was for Indiana. He was that quintessential glue guy that an Indiana team like this really needs.
Yep, 100%. And beyond that, I just want to bring up something that Woodson said post-game that honestly really surprised me. I know it surprised a lot of others, and I'll go back to the Assembly Call, it surprised them too. Woodson said he's still figuring out the team, and I'm sure that's true if he's saying it, but I can't really believe that you're saying it. It's mid-January. It's only going to get kind of harder or, not any easier, I'll say. No. And that was just kind of defeating to hear that.
I understand what he's saying, but at this point in the season, you've got to have a little bit more of an identity than what they really have at this current moment.
Yeah, I agree. You kind of took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say, I mean, they are, not to pull a Woodson card, but he, again, said they're a very young team. They're trying to figure it all out. But you're at this point in the season where you're 19 games in. And again, you're getting into the harder stretch of the season. So I think it will definitely... They need everybody healthy. And at these points in the games, I mean, you've had Xavier Johnson back, but still not 100% used to seeing the court again. Then right after Xavier Johnson almost does start getting a little bit more into a rhythm, Kel'el Ware gets hurt. So it's really, Indiana's luck is not on Indiana's side recently. So I think it really just goes back to the point of they just need to work together. And I think that's what Woodson's is really trying to preach, but they're just not all. Many of them are on the same wavelength, but they're not all on the same
Hayden,
wavelength.
I want to add one more thing before you hop in.
Go for it, Thomas.
Like yesterday, they were saying, Woodson was saying on the Don Fisher radio show that practices are brutal and they're really tough. Like these are not. It's quite frankly the complete opposite of what fans and people are looking for, and it's what we're getting.
Yeah, and especially whenever Don Fisher said during that Wisconsin game how embarrassed he is of Indiana basketball. I mean, again, that's really telling.
First time in 51 years.
That's really telling for where this team is at this point in the season.
And not because of the score.
Yeah.
I think that's the important point.
Yeah,
it wasn't because of the score.
Exactly. I mean, Don Fisher's words carry a lot of weight around Indiana basketball. You guys, Audrey, you really mentioned it. I think there's really just a lack of togetherness with this team. I look at the bench after nearly every bucket, and it's not what we've seen in the past. In the past, we've seen, say, Indiana, not really that big of a three, but they knock in a three that they probably needed at that certain moment, and you really don't see anybody but Anthony Leal get up off the bench and cheer on his team.
Who's currently hurt.
At one point, I did actually, I mean, I think I've said this a whole bunch of times, was that Anthony Leal has been the biggest leader that Indiana has seen, even on the bench. And I was watching at some point when they were heading into a timeout, was that Anthony Leal was the first person to get up, and he ran to the other side of the bench to grab chairs for everybody that was on the court and set them down for everybody. I think, like, if that doesn't say enough for the role that Anthony Leal plays in this team, I think it's crucial. And I think that it's good that he continues traveling with these teams, because you do see in many games that when these athletes are injured and they're going to be on the bench, they sometimes don't travel with the team, but he makes it a point to. And his leadership, I mean, despite these harsh results, I mean, he's always there no matter the score.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Audrey. I think Anthony Leal has been a great leader for this Indiana ball club, but he's a great leader on the bench, but they need that leader on the court as well. And that's what they're missing right now. But I mean, you've got plenty of pieces on the court that can fill that role. I mean, Xavier Johnson, he's a sixth-year senior. Trey Galloway's been with Indiana for the long haul. I mean, even a guy like Anthony Walker that has been in college basketball for quite some time. You've got plenty of options out there that can lead this team while they're out there on the court. Now, again, Anthony Leal just not getting the minutes that he probably should have gotten earlier in his season. But he's still easily one of the best leaders that Indiana has seen. Let's go back to a certain moment in the ball game with that C.J. Gunn ejection that I believe it happened in the second half. It's Max Klesmit.
Max Klesmit.
I wasn't at the game, so don't blame me. I apologize. But yeah, so Max Klesmit was absolutely having a phenomenal game. Might have gotten away with kind of shoving his head into the chest of C.J. Gunn, but in that certain moment, you just have to be able to be the bigger person and walk away. I just want to pick your all's brain at that certain moment. What did you all see, especially in the arena?
No one knew what happened at first. It genuinely, all of a sudden, they stopped play, and everyone was a little bit confused. Everyone was kind of already getting tired because there was a lot of stoppage in the game before that point as well. But then all of a sudden they showed it on the board, and I mean, everyone around, no one knew that happened.
They showed it. It was clear as day on the TV.
So I do think that Klesmit did initiate it a little bit, but again, C.J. Gunn just needs to keep his composure. And I understand that you're at that point in the game where you're down, and Wisconsin keeps on pulling off these really hefty runs, but that's something that Indiana, I think I've said it in literally every time when we talk about what needs to be done in order for Indiana to win these games is they need to keep composure. And they have not been doing that on the road. They 100% didn't do it at Wisconsin. And for that to happen, I mean, it was just... It was shown. It was shown. It was shown.
Exactly.
That's really it.
And Mike Woodson has already said he sent that play to the higher ups in the Big Ten, and it also might be in the NCAA to review that. I mean, again, I don't really think there's much the Big Ten or the NCAA can really do about that. It's clear as day that C.J. Gunn just kind of threw up his elbow right into the face of Max Klesmit. But again, like we all said, just got to be the bigger person, Thomas.
Yeah, I honestly kind of agree with Woodson's perspective on this. And Woodson's perspective he gave to us post-game, he obviously was not happy at all, and he wishes CJ handled that differently, as we all do. And composure is a massive, massive problem with this team, which I'll touch on in a couple minutes. But, yeah, Klesmit 100% initiated that. And, in fact, he put his head into him, kind of missed. Then
it's kind of like Brad Davison, if any of you all remember Brad Davison.
Yeah, a Grayson Allen move. Like, I don't know. Listen,
I don't miss him.
I don't either. Klesmit, I initiated it twice, and I'm not excusing Gunn. Gunn was obviously in the wrong, and he got ejected, and as he probably should have. But Klesmit is the player of the game. You're up 17 at home. You don't need to do that. And again, I'm not excusing.
No, I completely agree.
Gunn was in the wrong, bottom line, and he should have gotten reprimanded, which he did. But a flagrant 2 ejection when he didn't start it, and quite frankly, I personally don't necessarily think he meant to elbow him in the face. I genuinely believe he was trying to get him off, and what he should have done with his hands or something, but he mishandled it and
or
whatever.
Walk away.
Or walk away.
He just needed to walk away.
Anything would have been better than what he did. The whole thing was an unfortunate circumstance, and it reflects very poorly once again on Indiana. Their 4th flagrant in 4 games. They lead, I think, all of college basketball in flagrant fouls, and I think it's
7 compared to Arkansas's 5.
Yep, and
absolutely unreal.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, quite frankly, it's unacceptable.
It's not Indiana basketball.
It's not Indiana basketball, and that's the most important thing. But I do want to say, I think it was an unfortunate circumstance.
Well, like we said, we're 19 games in on the season. I want to circle back to what we did as a beat earlier preseason and take a look at our roundtable discussion and look at some of our predictions, guys. We're really going to get exposed here in a couple moments. So let's look back on this. If anybody of you all that's not watching, that haven't seen it, go to the Hoosier Network page on our website and just look up the Indiana basketball roundtable discussion. Just subtle plug right there. So let's go back to this, guys. We gave a couple of different predictions. I won't go into our actual season predictions because we're not at that point just yet to really determine where we were. But I want to look and see our different superlatives for each of these categories. First up, let's look at the MVP. All 3 of us said Xavier Johnson.
Woof.
Now, let's talk about this here for a second because we're not necessarily wrong. He should be the MVP of this team. He's just not been, and I think that injury really derailed him because he was playing solid basketball before that point. But we all still said Xavier Johnson, and that's really not panning out to what it should be.
I mean, you could have said before his injury he was the MVP.
100%.
But I think that after that injury, the team got acclimated without him. And then they started to run their different offensive scheme without him. And then that started to begin to run through Malik Renew and Kel'el Ware. And that's how they have continued to run. And Xavier Johnson, really, right now, he can't find his place within that. And I think he's trying to do that. And, I mean, in Wisconsin, I mean, he was one of the bright spots for Indiana, despite Malik Renew's, what was it, 26 points, 28 points. But still, I mean, I think we can all agree right now that Malik Renew is the MVP.
Easily.
But I think Xavier Johnson was the clear answer, and he probably would be if he never were to get that injury.
I'm not going to add too much to that. I agree. I think the injury, derailed a lot of his success this season and his potential this season. But I agree with Audrey that Wisconsin was a step in the right direction. It wasn't perfect by any means, and it wasn't even necessarily great, but it was good, and it was better than where he was, and it was one of the few bright spots, and it's definitely a step in the direction that Indiana absolutely needs going forward.
Now let's take a look at our next subject here, and that's the breakout player of the year for Indiana basketball. Now, I don't, in all honesty, I don't even really know who I would put at this spot currently, but Audrey and Thomas, both of you said CJ Gunn. I said Anthony Walker. Again, I don't really know who I'd put here, honestly. I think really Kel'el Ware would probably be a good
I would say
person?
for this Malik Renew. If you think about it, he was really not getting these 20-point games at all last season.
You're
and now
right.
Trace Jackson Davis and Race Thompson are out, and Kel'el Ware and Malik Renew are in. So I think right now for all of these superlatives, it's really Malik Renew is the answer.
Except for newcomers.
So, but I mean, you do have to say there are some points that I think all of our picks were actually good. You had Anthony Walker and CJ Gunn.
They've had their moments.
They've had their moments. So I don't think that they're necessarily bad picks, but I think Malik Renew is the clear answer, really.
I agree with you. But if we're going to stick one person in each category, I'm going to stick Renew as MVP. I'm going to give the breakout player, I might give it to Gabe Cupps. I think he's been good.
He's handled the offense.
Yeah, he's handled the offense. For what his
Especially
role...
for being a freshman.
For being a freshman, and for what his role was supposed to be compared to where it is right now, he has, I think, done a tremendous job, at least confidence-wise and in terms of doing what he's being asked to do. I think he's done a really admirable job, and so I'll stick him with the breakout player, if not Renew.
Now, the next one was newcomer of the year, and I think, for all three of us, I think really there's both of them are actually good picks. Audrey, you picked Kel'el Ware. Thomas and I picked Mackenzie Mbako. Granted, Mbako had his struggles to start off the year, but he started to pick things up. Audrey, I think you nailed this one.
I think I nailed that one. I'm actually really happy about that. I'm sorry.
You did.
I think you saw Kel'el Ware just continue to get more and more confidence as he played. And in those exhibition games, which was pretty much what we were basing this roundtable off of, you continued to see that. And you started to really see that. So, exactly. I mean, with that, he needed to fill the role of Trace Jackson Davis. And while those are still massive shoes to fill, he's really done a good job in trying to fill them, I think.
I completely agree. I think Kel'el Ware has obviously been incredible. And again, Mackenzie Mbako, like I said, he had his struggles early on. He's starting to really get a lot more comfortable and out there. And Thomas, I think we made pretty good picks there.
Yeah, that's a good round.
So moving on, we've got the player to watch. And Thomas, you really hit this one out of the park, picking Malik Renew.
Oh, nice.
Audrey and I did say Gabe Cupps. And granted, he has been a player to watch. I think you can really pick almost anybody on the roster at this one.
I think you can easily pick Gabe Cupps because no one was expecting him to be starting in Xavier Johnson's place.
You're exactly right.
I think that was a good pick on our. I mean, we all had obviously really good picks, but
For some of them.
But I think Gabe Cupps. Woodson did say he expected Gabe Cupps to play quality minutes, and he 100% has. I don't think anyone was expecting Xavier Johnson to get that injury to his foot. But Gabe Cupps has really done his part in filling those roles, especially on the defensive end.
Now, here's where it starts to get a little hairy. It is our boldest prediction. Guys, this one is, I'm just going to be honest, this one sucks. I think all three of us should be fired.
I'm not even
these picks.
I'm not looking at anything, so I'm like waiting.
I might take the headphones off and walk away right now.
I saw mine first and I'm like, whoa.
Audrey, let's start with you. You said your boldest prediction was that Indiana's second unit would be one of the best in the nation.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
Granted, no, you...
Okay. Listen.
I don't know. I don't know how I can defend this.
You have to look.
You started and they just gave up.
I gave up.
Okay. I think in the exhibitions.
Let's hear it.
In the exhibitions, which we wrote, which we based off of this,
they were
great. They were great. So
skip ahead a couple months.
Okay, but I think they could have actually. They may have actually been a lot better. if Gabe Cupps was coming off of the bench.
Yeah.
He is
No,
a
I agree.
starter, and more and more they've consistently began to use their starters more than they have their second unit. So I think if Anthony Walker were to get more playing time, and even, I mean, Caleb Banks does get a lot of playing time, and he's there on the defensive end, but they've started to really utilize their starters in their system.
They're
So
playing like 35 plus
I'm not
minutes.
mad about my prediction. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not mad about it because I think from what we saw in the preseason, they were definitely very, very good. And they were okay. You are like smirking at me on the side.
I'm not. I'm just getting ready for Thomas's.
I don't even know what mine is, so
Okay.
I'm waiting. to
You
see.
know what? We'll kick it off. I'll stop
Thomas,
talking.
let's go to your boldest prediction. You said that this Indiana team this year would be better than they were last year.
Yeah.
Thomas,
Oh my
please
God.
defend this for me.
No, I won't defend it for you, but I'll tell you where my mindset was. The topic is boldest prediction, and I was trying
it
to
was
make
bold.
a bold
It was
prediction.
bold prediction.
They brought in 2 new 5-stars with their third
Yep.
5-stars obviously picking up a much bigger, substantial role. Obviously, I was incredibly wrong, and I think that's for a multitude of reasons, which we've...
To be fair, they had the potential. It just hasn't been able to come together.
Yeah.
I get where you're coming from.
I thought that this team would click off the bat, and unfortunately, they still have not clicked.
Yeah.
So that's where that was coming
They've
from.
had their
a lot longer.
moments, though.
Yeah.
I
They've
mean, you
had their
can
moments
look
for
at...
sure. I'm not going to say not at all. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead. I had nothing really else to say.
But I don't know. The main thing was I was definitely trying to make a bold prediction. There's also a little bit of wishful thinking, but I was way off. But yeah, I mean, like you said, the potential was there, just didn't happen.
All right,
What do you got?
well,
Yeah, what do you got, Hayden? Why don't I read this
Like,
one off to you?
quietly.
Because he's the
Yeah.
host, so now I have something. I had this up on my
it's
computer.
not-
So
I mean,
Hayden,
I can defend this.
Hayden, you
Go for it.
said that Indiana holds one of the best defenses in the Big Ten.
Yep.
Go ahead.
I mean, to be fair, I'm not really that far off. They are 5th.
They're not bad.
They're 5th in defensive efficiency in the Big Ten in conference-only games so far this season. Now, granted, their last 2 games have been absolutely god-awful for Big Ten terms. I mean, they gave up 87 to Purdue, 91 to Wisconsin, probably bound to give up 85-plus to Illinois coming up on Saturday. They gave up 86 to Nebraska. So, no, it certainly hasn't hit like I thought it was. But I still think there's plenty of potential there. I mean, Indiana's defensive effective field goal percentage is one of the best in the Big Ten. Their defensive three-point percentage is second in the Big Ten. Their field goal percentage all around is 5th in the Big Ten. So I don't think I'm that far off now. Granted,
I don't think it's a bad take.
it hasn't accumulated like I thought it was. My understanding around picking Indiana would have one of the best defenses in the Big Ten, and I did also say nationally, and that one is way off. A big reason I picked that is because Indiana just has so much length out there on the defensive end. I mean, you have 7-foot Kel'el Ware that has a near 8-foot wingspan. I'd be actually really curious to know how big his wingspan actually is. You got Mackenzie Mbako out there, 6'8". You got Malik Renew out there, that's 6'9". Yes. And then your 2 guards that you normally would have out there, Xavier Johnson, Trey Galloway, both pretty good defenders. But again, it just really hasn't accumulated like I thought it was. So I'll take the blame for that one. Now let's move on to our final one, which was game to watch. And I think all of these have had their moments.
I'd say mine might be the worst.
I don't want to toot my own horn, but I think my game was the best.
Yours probably was.
I think if I remember mine definitely was not the end.
Thomas,
Did I pick
you was
UConn?
Indiana
UConn.
against UConn in Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, that was part excitement as well, personal.
Just ready to go back to
But,
New York.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
it was a fun, exciting, and that was their first test. Like that certainly was at the time their game to. I'm honestly gonna stick by it. That was their game to watch at the time.
Yeah.
That was their toughest competition by
I mean, it was
far.
a close game at halftime too.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, foul trouble really screwed them up that game. That was on Madison Square Garden. I'm not mad about that at all.
Audrey, you picked Indiana Purdue.
I think, does this count as home or away?
No. I don't know. You got to read yours. Did you say at home? Did you say away? Or did you just say Indiana Purdue?
I think I just said Indiana Purdue.
Then at that case, it remains
unanswered.
Now,
so if we were to go off of their performance,
not on your side.
Yeah. So if we were to go off of their home performance, I think I could count that second half and take that as a win. But that first half, they were down 51-29.
Ouch.
That I can't really defend that pick. But
really.
They have enough. I'm going to go that my game to watch out for is Indiana versus Purdue at Mackey Arena. So mine is still unanswered.
All right, well, we shall see how Indiana Purdue produces in Mackey. Yeah,
you picked a good one.
I wish there was a sound effect on our roadcaster that was like a train horn or something. It's not all the way up, Audrey.
Oh, whoops. Never mind.
All right, we're
I put
on
a pause
Maybe
on
we can edit it in there.
Yeah, we'll do something. But yeah, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I did pick Indiana, Kansas. Again, the Hoosiers
do want
lost
to toot
that
your
one.
own horn, I have to say.
You do.
I don't mean to. The Hoosiers lost that 175-71, but I mean, that had easily the best environment so far of the season. The Hoosiers led for the majority of that contest all the way until around the 5-minute mark. And I mean, again, you go back to that game, and I'd love to. I mean, Indiana wins that game against Kansas. I mean, boy, this
it's a whole different season.
I don't know. A whole different season, potentially, but it gives them a lot more momentum at the time to get a big-time quad one win against, at that point, a team that was ranked 5th in KenPom, 19 in KenPom, especially after losing that game to Auburn a couple days earlier. I mean, that would have been momentous for the Hoosiers moving forward. So, yeah, I'd say for the most part, we as a beat didn't do a fantastic job, but maybe we can go back and do like mid-season reports or something.
I think,
I'm gonna keep that in my back pocket for the next podcast. Be on the lookout.
If we maybe turned an eye to the boldest prediction, I don't think it's the end of the world. Maybe the MVP.
We've had our moments. We've had our
first
moments.
three were pretty good.
I have to say that Kansas game, I stand by it. I stand by that maybe it changes their season if they win that game. If they win that game, first of all, like you said, they were up 90% of that game.
Yeah.
You know, it was the last 5
all
minutes.
until the 5-minute mark.
Yeah. If they hold on and win
game
that,
changer.
they internally know that they're capable of winning a quad one game. And this is that was their second quad one game of the year or something like that?
Third, I believe.
So,
yes, it was the third because they had UConn first. Then they were played at Atlanta, Georgia, and Auburn, and then Kansas.
So there's 6 in now. What do they have? Another 5? I hope I'm not wrong.
Quad
about
ones?
That. Yeah.
They still have. They've got Illinois coming up, and then at Ohio State, at Purdue, at home against Wisconsin, and then at home against Michigan State.
So they have 5 more. They're currently 0-6. If they pick up that one against Kansas, who's, as far as I'm concerned, still top 3 in the country.
You're number 3.
Yeah.
Right?
Good job, Thomas.
That changes.
No,
everything.
sorry. Kansas is number 7. UNC is number 3.
Okay. But it's okay.
They
No,
were.
but
They
still.
were, though. They were.
At the time, they certainly were.
They were.
And, you know, that means a game like that means much more than just the win and just the number. Like, that tells you that you're capable and you belong. And I think it could have changed their season, but obviously I'm speaking in
especially
hindsight.
with Trey Galloway playing as good as he did in that ball game, scoring 30 plus. I mean, that just their overall confidence just goes through the roof after that game.
And I don't want to speak for them, but if I were to guess if they could have any of their games back,
that'd be a big one. 100%.
Yeah.
There's no question. I mean, with that one being easily one of their closest. Actually, it was their closest game that they had in quad one fashion. I mean, again, that's momentous for them, especially for a team that's 0-6 in quad one games. That is a recipe for the CBI. That's not even NIT right there. That is CBI material. So, well, we're going to move away from this sour subject and move on to potentially another sour subject as the Hoosiers travel out to Champaign, Illinois to take on the Fighting Illini. I do want to pick your all's brains here because last year was a huge discussion of, is this really a rivalry between Indiana and Illinois? It was a huge point of discussion, and Hoosier fans kind of put that to rest after sweeping them last season.
Yeah, I mean, it's a rivalry, I think.
Historically,
in a sense.
I'd say it is.
In a sense, I think it's a rivalry, and I mean, I think now that they're going to be going on the road, it'll be much more of a rivalry for Indiana on the road than it will be at home. So, do they play Illinois at home?
They do not play Illinois
so
home.
it'll be a rivalry for Indiana this season. So, but yeah, it's a rivalry.
I agree. It's definitely a rivalry. It's obviously not their biggest. I don't need to say what it is, but it's certainly a rivalry. The Knicks and Nets are rivals, and even though we take care of them every single time, including tonight, it's still a rivalry. So yeah, I agree.
Confidence. I love the confidence.
I had to throw that in there.
I love the confidence. Yeah, I'd say, especially growing up an Indiana fan, it certainly is a rivalry historically. I mean, even as of recent, Illinois had Indiana's number whenever Kofi Cockburn was in college basketball for the longest time. I mean, Cockburn really just dominated Trace Jackson Davis for a numerous amount of years until last season, whenever Trace Jackson Davis, Cockburn wasn't in college basketball anymore, and TJD just really went to work, scoring 35, and easily one of the best performances I've ever seen Indiana play in the past couple of years. Guys, really, what is it going to take for Indiana to win this ball game against a 9th-ranked KenPom Illinois team? It's a team that's still red hot. They're just absolutely dominating the competition this year, and especially with Terrence Shannon back on the team, it's just a whole new environment for the Fighting Illini. What is it going to take for Indiana to win this game?
I'll just go real quick because I don't know too much about Illinois, but I will touch on Terrence Shannon Jr. I do know that he is a very, very talented player, and he is now back. I think he has one game under his belt since his return. He just played against Rutgers. He had 16 points and 4 assists through 28 minutes. That's certainly a return that you will take if you're Illinois. So yeah, they were already great this entire season. Even with losing him, they managed, and now he's back. Indiana's challenge only got that much harder.
Yeah, I agree, and I think in my opinion, it's the same as always, is that Indiana is going to need to stay composed 100%. Especially on in this game, really. I mean, you have never seen it for Indiana on the road, except for Michigan, and that dominant win in Ann Arbor. But ever since then, their road play has honestly almost been non-existent. So they're really going to need to stay composed in these moments. And there is a chance that Indiana could definitely take advantage, and is that Illinois averages around 11 turnovers per game. So if Indiana can really be there on the defensive end, they can really take advantage in that sense. But they're going to also definitely need Kel'el Ware to play as well. And Woodson said that he's not sure as of yet. He said this on Monday's radio show with Don Fisher, that he's not 100% sure where he is just yet, and that he's not on the court. He hasn't really been on the court just yet. So if Kel'el Ware can play, I think that'll be a massive, massive piece. But again, they also do have this over a week off. So depending on what they're able to do in this week during practice, this game should be categorized as a must-win for them.
I'm just curious on your turnover point. Do we know what Indiana's averaging turnover was?
No, you're going to put me on the spot. I've got it right here. Indiana averages 12 turnovers a game, which is around where you want to be as a team in college basketball.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I mean, I'd say easily somebody has to step up and take charge of this ball club, because we haven't seen that yet. I think really the guy that has to do it is Trey Galloway. He is an Indiana Hoosier through and through. And, I mean, he was in this game last year whenever he saw Trace Jackson Davis dominate. Like you said, if Kel'el Ware can play, he's the tallest player on the court between Indiana and Illinois. The tallest player for Illinois is Coleman Hawkins at 6'10". Granted, he's not even a prototypical center. He's really more of a stretch power forward. A problem where I'm really going to see if Kel'el Ware plays, or if Malik Renew gets slide to the 5, is Dane Danger. Dane Danger is 6'9" and 270 pounds. He's an absolute tank down low. He gave Malik Renew problems last year, if I can remember correctly, whenever the game was played at Bloomington. Malik Renew got into foul trouble, so I'm really curious to see how the bigs of Indiana can handle guys like Danger and like Coleman Hawkins, especially with Hawkins was guarded the last couple of years by Race Thompson, and Race Thompson is a lot more mobile than, say, like a Malik Renew or Kel'el Ware is, especially on the perimeter. So I'd be curious to see if Mike Woodson puts Mackenzie Mbako on him. The only place I see that having trouble is Hawkins has 2 inches on him, which that's going to prove to be a lot, and especially with how quick Coleman Hawkins is around the paint. You all can tell I've watched a lot of Illinois basketball, or at least as of recent. But yeah, I mean, this Illinois team, if you can get them off the 3-point line and force them into tough shots, you're going to have a good time. That's exactly what the Maryland Terrapins did whenever they beat them in Illinois. And again, Indiana's already beat that Terrapin team early on this season. So if Indiana can take some things that Maryland did and copy that against this game in this game on Saturday, the Hoosiers are going to have some success. Let's move on to our final 2 topics of the podcast before we end. Thanks, guys. Player or players to watch for this contest?
I'm going to go based on the fact that if Kel'el Ware doesn't play, and I am going to say Malik Renew. So I think he will definitely be the most dominant on the court. He played all 40 minutes in Wisconsin, which is absolutely crazy.
He sat for, I think I saw it was like 20, 30 seconds.
Yeah.
I don't even know.
He sat
okay.
for like 20, 30 seconds because I can remember him coming off the bench and checking back into the game immediately.
I think it was like something. I think that was right when he maybe hurt his knee.
You're right. You're right.
When he hurt his knee.
Well,
Just
no,
for 20, 30 seconds.
I remember when he hurt his knee, he never actually went to the bench. They called a timeout. So
they might have.
So yeah, they called a timeout, and that's when he sat down. That
he
because
played a lot.
He 100% played 40 minutes.
It says on the statistic that he played for 40 minutes. So I know that when he did get injured, Indiana did call a timeout. So, but anyway, I think Malik Renew will probably see that amount of playing time once again. I think they need him the most out of everybody, and I think I'm not going to say that he's my player to watch, but I think Mackenzie Mbako would also play a crucial role in this game as well.
So we're not going with 2?
No, I'm just going to go with Malik Renew tonight.
I like it. I appreciate it. Thomas.
I usually I always find myself agreeing with Audrey, and I usually try and switch it up, but I'm not going to this time. I'm going to go with Malik Renew as well. He has been the clear stud all season long. Last game, he was one of, if not the only bright spot during the game. And he's easily the most consistent and one of kind of the only consistent. I'm sure I'm a little bit wrong about that, but
no, I think you're right.
For the most part, yeah, 100%. And I don't know. It's this Indiana team hasn't really given me a whole lot to look at a whole lot of other guys. So I'll keep it simple.
No, yeah, I think that's easily the safe option to go to. I mean, Malik Renew, like you all said, he's easily been the most consistent player all season long. He's been that go-to guy, and he's produced all season long. He's had an incredible sophomore year jump that I've really grown to love his play, especially from beyond the perimeter this year, which I would not have expected at this point last season. I'm going to go with Trey Galloway because really on the defensive end, being probably matched up with Terrence Shannon. If Terrence Shannon starts this game, he didn't start the last one against Rutgers. But if he's matched up with him, that's going to be a huge matchup, especially on the defensive end. If he can slow down Terrence Shannon, Indiana's going to have a good time, especially on the offensive end. I think the reason Trey Galloway isn't shooting as good as he was last season from beyond the arc is because, one, he's just taking a lot more shots, and 2, a lot of them are off the dribble. I mean, a lot of people forget last year he was really that guy just got set from beyond the perimeter, and then he'd just be a spot-up shooter, essentially, and that's why he was so effective from beyond the three-point line, and that's a reason why he's not shooting as good as he was last year. It's not like it's really concerning. He's still shooting above 30%, but I mean the number he shot last year was 40 plus. So yeah, I'm going to go with Trey Galloway, especially on the defensive end. Final segment here in TCP, guys. We're going to go with our predictions. I believe last time I think I was the closest last time. If I think right.
I put them close. I regret my. I said that it would be one of Indiana's best performances on the road, but I did pick Wisconsin. So I wasn't close in my score prediction, though. I would say.
I'll say this: I know Cruz, if I remember correctly, he had an 11-point game.
He had an 11-point game.
Well, there you go, Cruz. There you go.
Cruz had 75-64. What was it, 91-79?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you had the closest, Hayden, at 82-64.
Let's go. I know Indiana basketball.
Mine was just.
All right, let's go with our predictions, Audrey. What do you have for this game?
I think that Indiana will show up to perform better on the road. I'm not going to say this will be their best performance on the road.
Gotta be careful with our wording.
Gotta be careful with the words. But I think that Illinois is just way too dominant of a team right now. I mean, they are going to go far in the tournament and far in the season, obviously. But I do think that Indiana will show up because, as Mike Woodson said, their practices are brutal. So I think
wouldn't want to be in there.
I would not want to be in that room right now. So I think that they will perform better, but I'm still going to take Illinois 86-70.
Okay.
I'm going to go. I'll just say my score off the bat, and then I'll say why. Oh, wait, you have Illinois as well, right?
Yes.
All right, I have. I had this before.
Pick 'em, Thomas.
All right, 83-67. And I'm not just subtracting 3 from each of Audrey's score. I had that a couple minutes ago when I thought about it. But I'm going with this for a couple reasons. And I'm going to bring up the same reason that you just said, that practices are brutal. But I take that as it's going to be a tough game, not that they're going to show up.
Yeah.
Illinois is
83-67.
83-67. I'm going to stick by it.
Okay.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, it's the same point differential that Audrey has. I just think Illinois is much.
Are you proud of us or something?
I am. I am.
Yeah. Well, let me touch on that.
I'm rubbing off on you.
Yeah, I was confused for a second too, but let me tell the people if they don't already know. I've been very optimistic this season. I think recently I haven't been so much. I definitely wasn't last week against Wisconsin, but still I had it closer than 11, and obviously that didn't happen. So I'm only getting more pessimistic as we go on, unfortunately. But I got 83-67 Illinois.
I might start shedding a couple tears, but mainly because you guys picked a lot bigger point differentials than what I'm gonna say, and I high fives all around. This isn't something we should be high-fiving about, but this is just where Indiana basketball is at this current point in the season. I am also going to pick Illinois. I'm not going to just go absolutely insane and pick Indiana on the road here, but I'm going to say Indiana loses their third straight, but I'm going to say Indiana plays a little bit better offensively. They get their shots to fall kind of like they did in the second half against Wisconsin, but it's not going to be enough to stop Illinois' offense, and I'm going to take the Illini 83-73. So I'm gonna take 10, and you guys picked a lot higher. I
have a question before we wrap up.
Shoot.
If Indiana does pull out the win, what else? And I know this is a loaded question, but what else needs to happen?
If that happens, I'm celebrating.
Yeah, I mean, to say the least.
Because I'm writing a good article.
Yeah. But yeah, what do we think what does our season look like in a win against Illinois?
I think it turns it around. I think at this point,
yeah,
you have
especially for what the games. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but especially for the games that are coming up. Their last game of a 2-game road stand, and then they come back home. They take on Iowa at home. Then they take on Penn State at home. Then they travel to Ohio State before they play Purdue again. I mean, that gets them their first quad 1 win of the season, which is huge for their tournament chances. And I agree. I think it's. I don't know if it turns their season around, but it certainly gives them a huge confidence boost moving forward.
Yeah, and I think it really does depend a lot of these when the tournament is assessed and decided. The wins on the road are a massive part of that, and I think that this would turn their season around. Was it not last season that at this point in the season Indiana was 12-4? I mean, no, sorry, 12-7. I saw
some stat like that.
Yeah. They were 12-7.
I think you're exactly right. Oh
so,
no, I'm gonna.
They were 12-7 at this point.
They were 12-6.
Okay, still.
Essentially, yes, right around that mark.
Right around the same time. So, Indiana just needs something to turn it around.
They need something that can really get their momentum going and really just get them going in the right place.
Yeah.
This would certainly do that.
I completely agree. Well, we went a little bit longer than we wanted to, but I'd say this was a successful podcast. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Throwing Chairs podcast. Be sure to follow the Hoosier Network on all of our social media platforms to stay up to date on Indiana basketball. Until next time, alongside Audrey Marr, Thomas Montalbano, what are you guys doing? Are we not doing it anymore?
I wait till you say.
Oh, yeah, well, you usually have it first, so I was waiting for
Alongside
you.
Audrey Marr, Thomas Montalbano, I'm Hayden Smith, hanging the phone up on this episode of TCP. Have a great day, Hoosier fans.